Welcome, everybody. Larry Sparks, and I am so thrilled to be talking to one of our favorite people. You may remember him from such times as Culture of Honor, Loving Your Kids on Purpose. I've got the one and the only Danny Silk with me. And Danny, thank you so much for coming on to have this conversation.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me, Larry.
Well, and I'm thrilled about this new book. Now, this is literally hot off the press. Now, when this goes live, you will be able to order it. And I want to just let you guys know right now, the link is there, dragonslayers.co. It's the
There you
place to
go.
go. I just that's that
There
there you go. Uh, but Way of the Dragon Slayer. I mean, again, you know what we do at Destiny Image. We're very prophetic, and that's kind of the community that we've cultivated. But I would say, Danny, that the timing for the release of this book is very prophetic as well in our culture. I
right.
believe a book aimed at men, at cultivating strong brotherly relationships, and really helping men to run towards their male identity again and run after that in a very healthy but strong and unapologetic way. You have released a book in due season, Danny. So I'm going to ask you this question after Culture of Honor, and then most recently, I'm thinking, I mean, a blockbuster book, Keep Your Love On. What motivated you? What compelled you to do a book aimed at men, particularly, why men need brothers and strong relationships?
I think that we're all very aware of the breakdown of family. Our whole Loving on Purpose's whole mission is really to resource families until whole healthy families save the world. That is really what we're all about. So whether it is through Keep Your Love On and that whole message, or Culture of Honor, or Loving Our Kids, Powerful and Free was addressing the women. This is the 10th book. What the Dragon Slayer is 10 books
Wow.
later. And I feel like I write the same book over and over and over. I just change the book cover. I just keep changing the book cover. And I just feel like I'm saying the same thing from another facet. So this very much is aimed at the men, and largely because I think the breakdown of fathers in the home, the fatherlessness epidemic, and the tragedy for women and children that are left uncovered, unprotected, unprovided for, unloved. The real breakdown there is, I think, the breakdown of healthy, whole brotherhood. That men being connected to one another, holding each other accountable, pulling each other up, supporting each other. When that goes away, men are easily isolated, and isolated men are easily deceived into their own desire, right?
Wow.
Proverbs 18:1, a man who isolates himself seeks his own desire and rages against wise counsel, which means don't tell me what to do. I won't adjust. And now we have a bunch of just hairy boys. We don't have men out there. We have hairy boys. So the brotherhood idea really is, I think, what we've seen it in, most typically built during wartime. So there'll be this bond of brotherhood from men in foxholes who spend years together and the most vulnerable times of their life. And then they create a bond that they don't forget for the rest of their life. And it's been a while since we had a war that gathered up the men, the boys, and turned them into men, and then turned them into brothers. So now we have a very maybe unprecedented condition where men are so easily picked off and turned inward and happy to be selfish.
Yeah. Well, let me ask you this question. What are some of the cultural things right now? And the list is probably sadly quite lengthy, but what are some of the cultural issues right now taking aim at men? Because as you're talking about this, isn't that the goal of the dragon, of the enemy, is to isolate men, is to certainly do whatever he can to prevent men from having those strong bonds and relationships, is that accountability, that alignment, that iron sharpening iron. But what are some of the things that men just need to be on the lookout for? Because I really believe this book is going to be the solution. I don't want to I don't want to live all the time hyper aware of all the problems, but what are some of the things culture is aiming right now at men that you think need to just be addressed?
It's let me just back up and say that a
Sure.
man's primary role, a masculine uh, input into society, is protection. That a man would protect those in his care, and uh, the idea that a man is that he's stronger for a reason. Uh, he's either a protector or he's a predator. This is very much in the nature of men. Then he's a provider. And provider isn't just simply bring home the bacon. It's really that he saturates his environment with benefit so that those around him are actually nourished
Good.
from the life that he creates. They're inspired, they are impacted, they are shaped, they are identified. There's all kinds of things that go along with the provision of a man to his family and to those that belong to him. And then he's a connector. So he's really in charge of the standard of love in the home. Just like, husbands, love your wives as Christ loved the church. That's a
Yeah.
pretty high calling. And it's not wives, love your husbands as Christ loved the church. And yet, many times, women are saddled with the responsibility of the experience of love in the home. So, those three things are under assault. And I would say, probably primarily, what we are watching happen is the epidemic of pornography.
Yeah.
Pornography would probably be the Antichrist spirit's number one disqualifier of men as protectors.
Wow.
When a man begins to participate in pornography, he knows he's predatory. He
Mm.
knows he's consuming. He knows that the shame that he feels is directly connected to failing to protect the weak, failing to protect the vulnerable, failing to protect our women and children. And so he now loses his moral authority, and he is now taking, he's afraid of that conversation.
Yeah.
He's afraid of that confrontation. He's not going to confront it to anybody else. And I'm just talking about the pastors.
Yeah.
I'm just talking about the spiritual leaders,
Yeah.
the business leaders, because they have been deluded in their role as protector. And now when sex trafficking and that sort of conversation comes up, he's disqualified himself because he's actually participating as a consumer in what is probably the most tragic thing that we are aware of in our society today is the exploitation of women and children sexually by male consumers.
Mm.
So, I mean, that would just be one of the obvious
Yeah.
ones
Yeah. Big
that,
time.
then you throw out all the drugs and alcohol and, the other ways that we dull ourselves to responsibility, to thinking outside of ourselves. And, and once the dominoes start falling with pornography, you now have a generation of men who don't need a woman to uh, sexually express themselves. They're now caught up in masturbation and just
Yeah. Yeah.
trapped in this ongoing cycle. And then they start going, gosh, women look difficult. Gosh,
Mm.
I think I'll just stay single and I'll just use all my money on myself. So now I won't be providing for anybody but myself. So now, boom, I
Mm.
collapse as another masculine aspect of my life. And then I don't have to love anybody. I don't have to sacrifice for anybody. I don't have to learn how to make human connections and communication. Boom, now I'm not a connector either. So the Antichrist spirit is working overtime to demasculize men with their own voluntary effort.
Wow. Wow. Well, I'm thinking as well, Danny. One of the other things I'm just pondering is this whole language, and you really do confront it in the book. I think by giving a healthy vision of masculinity, with this language of toxic masculinity. Um, what would just some brief commentary on that, because you get that more and more from media and such, and when men do step into that role of strength and appropriately as protector and provider. And again, what you outline in the book, it seems like there's a push against them from doing that, which is so strange. And it's called obviously this toxic masculinity.
Absolutely. I mean, anything that you put the word toxic in front of is the problem, right? Toxic broccoli. You cannot just throw the word toxic around and not scare everybody of whatever's behind it. So
Yeah,
toxic femininity, toxic marshmallows, whatever you
all of
put
it.
the word toxic in front of it poisons it. So that is just a, a fallacy of conversation and communication, that you call something toxic as a whole thing. Um, there definitely are abusive men. There literally are millions of irresponsible, selfish men, as are there abusive and selfish women.
Oh
Okay,
yeah,
so you can't just annihilate an entire gender with a word and it fairly, but you certainly can get that in the media and you can get it going. Clearly, when you break down a man in any of those or all three of those areas of his responsibility, protection, provision, and connection, you have a man that is misusing his strength,
yeah,
misusing his office, misusing his position. So with that aside, I would say that uh, disqualifying our boys
hmm.
by attacking our boys with this conversation, and then providing them with no role models and or brotherhood to move from boy to manhood, because boys don't become men just because they get older. They just get hairier. Now we have a bunch of hairy boys running around acting
Yeah.
like children and wanting to find women that will be their mommy. Like,
Oh,
oh, this is a disaster. And then
yeah,
creating a family around that craziness, that's going to lead to numerous divorces and more fatherlessness. But if
yeah,
you have a brotherhood that is committed to moving boys into manhood, confronting the unhealthy attachment of a mother to her son and allowing him to actually be offered into manhood, now you're talking. This is what civilization has done since its beginning, is move boys into manhood with men.
yeah. Oh, I think that's so good. Let me ask you this last question. This went so quickly because I feel like I'm actually sitting here in the counselor's office, which is actually quite wonderful. Because the wisdom that because this is you're a practitioner of this. I mean, I just know from having followed your ministry for all these years, you've had so many conversations, you've walked so many people through these conversations, and let me ask you this: what's your vision for this book? If men take a hold of these principles, if men read this, digest it, practice it, and really build those strong brotherly relationships, what is your vision that this would produce in society?
The last chapter is called Billy's 12, and this really
Yeah.
comes from a conversation that a friend of mine had with Billy Graham in his last days. And he said, if you had it all to do over again, would you do anything different? And he says, yeah, I would have gathered 12 men and poured my life into them. So there is the model, really, is that I take responsibility to gather brothers, up to 12 men, and I have been meeting with my 12 guys for the last 4 years. We have a monthly Zoom call. We plan adventures together, and they don't even know each. I mean, they know each other now, but some of them still 4 years later haven't met each other face to face yet.
Wow.
And it's just a commitment that I've made to these men, that I'm going to walk with you for the rest of my life.
Mm.
And then they've all agreed to do the same, to go find 12 men and to pour their lives to be the hub of gathering and responsibility and benefit. protection, provision, and connection. They're being men to other men, and those men have agreed to do the same thing. So now, when you get 6 levels down, you're 3 point something million men, and a couple more generations, it's like 400 million men. So the math on this is like compound interest, right? But that is what I hope and expect to do, is just encourage men to be that hub brother that will gather other men who promise to do the same thing.
I love it, Danny. This book is phenomenal. You've really given men a gift with this. You can order it now, dragonslayers.co, The Way of the Dragon Slayer. Again, you are an ideal person to have written this, only because you have run with this message. You have had the conversations. You've walked many men through this, just obviously being a pastor and a counselor. And I'm grateful. I'm grateful for what this book is going to produce in a culture of men, and raising up these strong, brotherly, iron sharpens iron types of relationships. So grateful for you, Danny. Grateful for this book.
Thank you so much, Larry. Appreciate it.
Yep. And again, for our Destiny Image office, our community who's watching right now, the book is available, dragonslayers.co. You do not want to miss it.